So today I wanted to start, I kind of have been going through, if you notice, the astrology basics to sort of build the foundation. So now I want to start going through each of the individual planets and signs. And so today I want to look at Mars and Mars through the signs and Mars through the houses. And I'll give you some, like, in your packet, you have all like the descriptions, but I'll give you some of like the nuggets I've learned along the way in different ways that people live out the different placements. So Nicole, I just have yours up. And what we're doing is we're looking for Mars. So let's for a moment talk about in the psyche, what Mars represents and what it represents developmentally. So last week, I don't remember if it was last week, because I know last week I pre-recorded before my appointment. Maybe it was the week before. I went through the speed of the planets. Mars is a planet that goes through the entire zodiac every 2 years. So from a developmental standpoint, Mars is referring to the terrible twos. And when the child has gone full circle of one rotation of Mars from birth until 2, he's now considered to be in the terrible twos. So what happens in the terrible twos developmentally? There's a force of will, right? The child is trying to dominate, exercise his will on the parents. He starts saying no, he starts saying mine, he starts saying me. So that is the energy of Mars in the chart in general. Now, layered on there will be the sign, and then of course the house. But at the root, this is an exercise of will. So let's talk about the concept of will for a moment. You're going to have parents, and I'm just going sort of a little deeper just so you can have the bigger picture. You're going to have parents that allow children to dominate and sort of burn the house down. We don't like that, but that's permissive parenting, you know, where the child sort of allowed to be free reign. Or you're going to have more of authoritarian type of parent that is no, no, no. And so somewhere in the middle, in psychology, we would call this more of like an authoritarian parenting, where you give choices, you mediate, you find that middle ground. Usually you're dealing with either the child runs the house or the child is shut down. And the child is trying to find that space in which he or she has a say, has some dominance over their lives. Of course, at 2 years old, that's not what's allowed, but then that habit is then prolonged into adulthood and they show up at your office. So Mars in the chart, first of all, is from Aries, this idea of I am, right? This is how I act. So if it's how I act out, is another way that you can look at that by not only planet, but by sign and by house, is going to tell you how this person exercises their will. The thing is that most people use it in a low consciousness way of ego. Ego is necessary. Ego is part of our personality, of our existence. It's something that's necessary that we can stand out in the world and use our fire and have an identity. But really, in a healthy person, or in someone who's been individuated, the purpose or the will should be driving it, and then the ego should sort of take a back seat and ride the wave. Most clients are not going to appear that way. Most clients are going to appear in an I am or an I act in an assertive, and this is how they self-destruct. So when I use like the words about when I say like you learn to use your fire or man your fires, this is what I'm talking about. You either overboard and you burn the house down, blow up your life, or it's too diminished. You have no fire. You're sitting on the sidelines of life because you can't bring yourself to exercise any will. So either extreme is obviously not healthy. So understanding this from not only a spiritual, astrological, but also psychological perspective gives you the full gamut of why this planet is so important. In your mythology, I talk about Hercules being the favorite student of Chiron. If Chiron is our narcissistic injury, if Chiron is our wound, our deepest, darkest wound, we do not want to be found out that we are flawed, that we're imperfect, that someone's abandoning or rejecting us, or we're not worthy. The way we hide our wound is through Mars. So most people will come to you with an overdeveloped or an underdeveloped, seemingly, depending on the sign in the house, Mars. And it's the way that they hide the wound. Any questions up until that?
Got it.
Okay. So it's the will, it's the drive, it's the ego, usually out of sorts, out of whack. And so just think of the terrible twos. That person, no matter what age they are in some version of the Mars cycle. When we start doing aspects and we start doing transits, you're going to see if it's in a trine or a sextile, that ego or that will or that dominance is working for them. If it's in a square or even a conjunct at times, or a quincux, for instance, an opposition, it's not working for them. So that's how you are then going to guide them to be assertive, to be aggressive, to absolutely go and use, let's say, low consciousness, ask for their refund, sort of ask and assert what they want, or how you're going to guide them to step back. This is not the time to be assertive, turn the other cheek, say no, no, no. So that is going to be the guide for that when we start looking at aspects, is how they use it in their natal chart, and then transits in the transiting. But since Mars is constantly going around every 2 years, it's always going to be aspecting at some point because it's a short-lived cycle. So that's going to be one of those personal planets that you're going to learn where it is at all times, so that you can see why the person is either very aggressive or why they're taking a step back, why they're shy versus why sometimes they're more aggressive. So let's start with some keywords. Assertion, no matter where it is in that house and sign, is how they're going to wear the assertion. The Mars, for instance, is the assertion, right? Or the pioneer, or a level of urgency. There's a danger, there's a rawness to that planet. There's an impatience to that planet. The way that the person wears it, imagine like the tattoo is the sign. So in Nicole's case, she's going to wear it in a very, very Virgonian way. And then the way that they're going to display it, or where they're going to display that, is in the house. Wherever the person has Mars, that is their battleground. That is where they fight or don't fight, or try out their fighting, or exercise their dominance, or pull back on their fear, or exercise fearlessness. That's their battleground. That's where it's contained. So it's a very, very important house. Just like you would think of the sun being where they try to shine, where they try to have an identity, this is where the ego is going to be practiced. The sign is the sort of layer or tattoo or coloring that they give what's at the root of us all, that ego, that will, that dominance, that I want it my way, those terrible twos. Okay, so let's start first with the signs. So in Aries, a Mars in Aries, you would expect to be a very impulsive, aggressive, assertive personality, especially in that placement of their chart. A Mars in Taurus, that's going to be someone who's very, of course, bullheaded, determined, possibly doesn't ever, it's like a dog with a bone, they never let it go, because they have now the persistence and the determination of Taurus with the aggressiveness and the assertiveness of Aries or Mars. So that's how we layer it. And we'll see a few in different houses. I have a chart of Mars in Taurus in the 8th. So we'll start sort of making those sentences. Mars in Gemini. So, and I want to show you a particular chart of someone who has Mars in Gemini in the 9th, which is technically the opposite place of where it should be. So if Mars is agitation, if Mars is aggressive or assertive energy, Gemini is someone in constant thought or constant motion. Think of Mercury's winged sandals. And it's in the 9th that's supposed to be a house of unification, of maybe more peace or meditative or spirituality, and the mind doesn't stop, it seems to be the antithesis of what you would want your ninth house to be. So that would be a focal point of a person who maybe seeks constant spiritual education, but maybe never applies it or never settles down to actually integrate the teachings. Mars in Cancer. In your handout, in your workbook for Mars, you have like a section that's mundane mythology. Towards the end of that section, I have some notes. The key Mars that go with this myth that I share in that packet, but I'll reiterate, are Cancer, Libra, and Pisces. Your Cancer Mars, your Libra Mars, and your Pisces Mars people, those are going to be people that internalize the anger, internalize the competition, internalize the confrontation. And there's a myth where Aries is put in a vase, and he's locked in a vase, and Hermes comes and lets him out. Those three signs are related to that specific piece of the myth: Cancer, Libra, Pisces. Virgo has a little bit of that. Virgo will tend to do more of the body stuff, but those three are the main ones where they swallow, internalize, passive aggressive, non-confrontation. So you'll want to pay attention, of course, to the sign, to the house that it's in, to see where they're doing that. But of course, if it's in the first house or the sixth house, some of the health houses, you can see how that can become adrenal fatigue, how that can become, maybe inability to sleep, restlessness, anxiety, things like that, because it's sort of like energy trapped in the body. Mars in Cancer, like I said, avoidance of confrontation, very passive aggressive. Mars in Leo. So now you've got Mars being an ego word and Leo being an ego sign. Obviously, there's going to be an ultra ego or an ultra desire to get their way, very competitive. That type of placement in the fifth house, which is the house of the athlete, the house of competition, the house of creation, would do great. They might go in and out of lovers, on the daily, but in terms of creativity or channeling that energy, that would be a good place for it. That would be where Mars and Leo in the fifth thrives. But to have that uber ego or ultra competitiveness and not have a physical outlet. Mars also represents like the athlete. So if you have it in a good house, like the fifth, which is the Olympian, or the first, which is the physical body, those are people you definitely want to have kinesthetic, some physical activity where they can release that that energy, because it's very built up in the body, and the body's the best outlet for it. Mars in Virgo. So there's going to be obviously an element of perfection, of criticism, and most importantly, I do it better. I'm not going to delegate. I do it best. Now, depending on where it is, so for instance, in your chart, you've got it in the 12th. So if we're looking this at completion, if we're looking this as humanity is we're all one, we're looking at it obviously from a spiritual, in your practical, what you do for work perspective, it makes sense that would be the place in which you would channel that energy. Now, if this is the house of secrets, if this is the house of the shadow, if this is what's at the depths of your subconscious, and you can't see your own overcritical nature or own judgmental nature, own perfectionist nature, and that keeps you from delegating, then that's a different aspect of it. So of course, what part of our job as astrologers to channel that which is, that's the nature of the client, but putting it in a space where it's healthy or productive for them. Because you're not going to change the aspect, you're going to change the perspective or how they channel it so that they can use it to their advantage. Mars in Libra is one of those non-confrontational, internalizing Mars, and it is linked to a very compromising or amenable nature. So what tends to happen with Mars in Libra is, if here is my ego that's linked to my identity, that is my mark on the world, and I have to be a people pleaser because the sign dictates, you can see how that is a struggle. I vacillate from the other being important to me being important. So even though they're not confrontational, they can do some subconscious patterns to eventually make it about them. But they're sort of obligated through the sign to make it about the other. When we do Mars in the houses, we're going to see a similar thing with Mars in the 7th. This is the relationship house, and I see the 7th house as the door to your front door. When someone opens your front door, how do you greet them? If you have Mars in the 7th as a greet, you're going to be yelling and screaming and punching them. Well, that isn't the most diplomatic house then. So you see that because they're opposites, Aries and Libra. So Mars and Libra being opposites, you see those people tend to vacillate between the 0 to the 100, the extremes. Mars in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio, and I'll show you a chart in a minute. Mars in Scorpio is the most sexual placement in all of the charts. So many years ago, I was giving a reading to a client / friend, and her newfound lover had Mars in Scorpio. I think he might have had it in the 12th. I can't remember. But I said that to her. She goes, no, he has no sex drive. And I was like, oh, absolutely not true. So because Scorpio is also possessive, because Scorpio is also disciplined, because Scorpio is also can be very measured to get control, it's not the impulsive Mars in Aries, which is also a very sexual placement. The thing with Mars in Aries is a sexual placement where the person might be very selfish in bed, where they might come very quickly, ejaculate very quickly, because they're just, it's a race, not Mars in Scorpio. So Mars in Scorpio is in this person's case, and they eventually got married, and they've been married for years. They slowly dish out the poison, if you will, like to lure you in. But Mars in Scorpio is a sexual placement no matter where in the chart, but put it in the 8th or in the 5th, that person has an extremely high sex drive, but they might just not show it all at once. But that combo is extremely sexual. Mars in Sagittarius. So Jen, I think you have Mars in Sagittarius. Idealistic, stretching limits, impractical, aspires, the dreaminess and the sort of the Zeus nature, right? Of big plans and big sort of dreams in terms of seeking and where they're going and where they're headed. That's actually a really nice placement depending on what it is. And you have it in the 11th, so you have it in a really nice place. But there's a bit of impracticality to the ego, to the largeness of the seek, or the search, I should say. Mars in Capricorn, I have that. I'll show that one to you in a bit too. Ambition on overdrive, distinction, status on overdrive in that particular area. And then, of course, we're going to look at the aspects. So in level 2, when we start to layer the aspects, if someone has a trine or a sextile, that can help augment. But if there is indeed a square or an opposition, then it's going to make it less of a possibility. So that's the other thing. The person independently, that's why we look at the chart holistic and we don't piecemeal. The person has a really good placement of Mars. I have an exalted Mars in a great house, the 2nd house, but it happens to be squared 2 of my planets. So of course it's going to diminish the power of it. Mars in Aquarius. I love Mars in Aquarius. Unique, original, genius, unconventional. It's a really, if Mars is already quick, Mars is already like impulsive. Mars already has sort of that hit of intuition with that eccentric, logical thought. That combo is really great. That is also a sexual combo, but not in the way you would think. It's more of a hit. It's more of like an intuitive hit, like, ooh, I want that. Ooh, I want to go after that. In mythology, when Uranus over here is castrated, his testicle falls into the ocean. So the nature of Aquarius, even though it seems weird, is pretty sexual because the testicle is at the root of the myth. And then Venus, Aphrodite, is born, and Aphrodite is a very sexual placement. But Mars, when someone has Mars and Uranus in the chart, whether it's conjunct or square or opposition, they tend to have not only a very impulsive, short-tempered nature, I have that, but it gives you like a just follow that. And so sexually, it's a very appealing placement. And so even though it's in a roundabout way, Mars in Aquarius, there's an eccentricity or a graspability that the person sees in that person that has that placement that makes it very attractive. That's the thing. It's not a sexual like a Scorpio that just might have a really mystical way about it. It's something about the eccentricity that makes that person sexy. And that's part of that, especially in the Mars in a woman's chart is how women like their man. So that's another sort of nugget that's also in your notes. And then Mars in Pisces, the pacifist and the non-combative nature. But you can imagine how passive aggressive and how they internalize and internalize and internalize that eventually they've got to blow. So that's with the Cancer and the Libra tendencies. Any questions about that? And then we'll look at some chart at different houses.
Hi, Frances. I don't know if you saw me get on or not.
No, hi, how are you?
I'm fine. So now that we're at Mars in Pisces, and my Mars is in my 4th house with my son.
Perfect. We're going to do the houses in a minute.
Okay.
But there's a incongruence between Mars and Pisces and then Mars in the 4th. So I'll go through all the houses, but just to address your question, Sharon. Mars in the 4th. The house where Mars is found is gonna be where you tend to fight. So for instance, your family, your marriage, yourself, like that's all the meaning of the planet now in the house. Now, and we're gonna go, like I said, through each of the signs, but just to talk about that incongruence. If Mars in Pisces is the pacifist, but yet Mars in the 4th is anger or the confrontation with self, you can see that it doesn't serve to be a pacifist with others because it's just going to be self-inflicted. So part of the healing of that placement, because it has that incongruence, I won't fight towards others because it's in a pacifist sign. And the 4th house is about me or my family, but let's just talk about myself, my inner space. So the fight is inward. Well, finding a point where it's appropriate to fight externally when it's not appropriate to be pacifist, and finding an appropriate place to, yes, confront yourself and call yourself out. That's going to be the healing juncture. That's going to be the way to heal that midpoint or that incongruity. So that's what we're going to see now with all of the houses. Yours isn't retrograde, I don't think. And what I'm going to say about retrograde is not for everybody, but it is a pretty, let me just see if I have yours, but I don't think yours is retrograde.
So Frances, you were saying like Mars, Virgo in the 12th specifically could be about things hidden and not seen within oneself. One of the things that I get really critical and pissed off about are the things that other people aren't disclosing and talking about, but it's like, I can see it and it's so obvious. And I'm like, wake the F up. Let's look at this. That seems right for that placement, right?
Yeah, that's appropriate. Because if you think of, let's just go to the myth for a second. Zeus and Hera, king and queen of Olympus, have 2 sons, Ares and Hephaestus. Ares is the preferred son. The planet here is Mars. So he is kind of like the preferred son of the king and queen of the zodiac. So you have a particular egocentric nature in that space because of the myth, because of obviously all the meaning of the planet. And you somewhat are on a throne, right? That's why it's about me and I am and me, and I act out and what I want. So you can see other people's 12th house. You could see other people's judgments and criticism or over perfectionism in themselves. But because it's at the 12th house, you don't have that same perspective. And that's where law of correspondence or mirroring would be phenomenal for you, because the moment that you see it and knowing that it's in Virgo, you know it's going to be a tendency to criticize or not delegate or judge, then you turn that right around. But that is the issue with that particular Mars, is that if it's the ego, if it's the throne, and I'm supposed to be on the throne, but now I'm in the place of my brother. What I mean by my brother is Zeus and Hera have two sons, Ares and Hephaestus. Hephaestus is the one that's thrown to the bottom of the ocean. A Neptune in the 12th is what should be there. Ares shouldn't be at the bottom of the ocean. So there's an incongruence where the kid that's supposed to be on the throne is at the bottom of the ocean. And so part of your psyche is, how do I get back on my throne? Or how do I get back on top in a place that I'm not supposed to be? So of course it could be that over criticism. And like I said, you could see that in others. And as you said, so now bringing it to self, what makes you that way towards yourself? And then using that mirroring. Anything that's in the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house, which is like 90% of my chart, merits the mirroring technique, because they're subconscious houses that you can't really see yourself. That's why I'm a bit obsessed with the law of correspondence, because so much of my chart is hidden with the Piscean nature that once I really learned that law, it allowed me to really see myself clearly, because the ruler of my chart, not only being a Pisces, is Neptune. I don't have a true perspective of myself, and I know that. So that delusion, I needed that tool. And for your particular chart, that Mars, for you to see yourself accurately, will serve you for that particular piece. So this is Sharon's chart. So she doesn't have it in retrograde. Retrograde is when a planet looks like this. It has an RX right above it. So this is a tidbit. Not every single person, but it's pretty accurate. When someone has a Mars in the 4th, the home tends to be agitated. And in Sharon's case, I know specifically her father was a military man. So it's going to be someone who has abuse in the home, a military person. They go to the military, or they come from a military family. There can be fighting in the house, like a violent fighting nature. And if the Mars is in retrograde, 99% of the times there is abuse. There is some sort of sexual abuse, more so than physical, but it can go either way. So many years ago, I did a reading for a girl, and she had Mars in the 4th retrograde. And I asked her, I said, were you raped? And she said, yes. So that's one of those sort of nuggets that 99% of the time, if it's retrograde in the 4th, doesn't matter the sign. So Sharon, here is, which is it's a pretty awesome conjunction that you have here. You've got your identity in the 4th. So home life, your introspective nature, your personal self, right? There's the 4th house is myself, with the sun, myself, and I have the same thing in Pisces. And then you've got 2 warrior planets on the side. This is a very clear Amazon lineage. Black Moon is Amazonian and Mars is Amazonian. Most women, when you have a conjunction of the Sun Mars that close, have an Amazonian lineage. Sharon, if you don't mind me sharing, has this, got breast cancer. That is like textbook, because the Amazonians chopped off their breast. So this is a placement that's very, very common for women that have breast cancer, because they come from the Amazonian lineage. So they're fighters by nature, but because she has everything in Pisces, all of that anger, all of that fighting, all of that aggression, all of that assertion is turned inward. That's the incongruence that I was talking about. and she's got Black Moon that's a fighter, and she's got Mars that's a fighter. That has to come out somewhere. So maybe she fights with her family, the fourth house, but the fourth house, more so than just being your family, your childhood home, is yourself. And so it's all directed inward, inward, inward. And that's a very marked case. Now, just to take the chart a little further, in a shadow house, she's got Uranus, and her ascendant is Scorpio. Those are two very marked placements of inward. So there's a thematic here of I'm my target. The target is me. I am the target. And then look at a fourth house sun. The focal point is myself, my home and my inner space. So all of that Pisces is inward, inward, inward. Does that make sense, Sharon?
It does. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what we do is when we start finding these incongruencies like that, here's this Mars in Pisces, but it's targeted inward, is we have to find the appropriate nature, because Mars and Black Moon are both fighters. I mean, she's a fighter, she's a feisty woman, right? So, but rather than make all the fight inward, let's find the appropriateness of when to fight and then when not to fight. When to do the confrontation of Mars and Pisces that's not comfortable, and when to say, no, this isn't a fight that I need to participate in. That's part of the counseling trip. So let's go just, I don't know if I have Mars in all of the houses in charts. I have a few. Let me tell you about Mars in the first. So Mars in the first, remember, every planet has a light aspect and a shadow aspect. The shadow aspect of Mars in the first, similar to the fourth, is that they're going to be the target. They might be great athletes. They might be very assertive in speaking up. They might be trailblazers. So it's like having Aries in the first. It's very similar. But the shadow is these people can cut. These people can be very self-inflictive in terms of pain. They have a tendency to surgeries, to burns, to accidents. So they're prone to that. Because remember, the meaning of the first house is the physical. The second house, when you have Mars in the second, the tendency is to overspend. So in my particular case, I have a great I have a great placement of an exalted Mars, but if my value is linked to this ego and the way that I'm going to live that out is in a Capricorn, well, I'm going to spend. And I definitely overspend. I'm getting better. And then I have it square my Uranus, which gives me a short temper. So I have no lack of impulsivity to spend. So that's been a lifetime in the making. So when you see Mars in the second, those people make impulsive financial decisions. And so part of the counseling is like, whoa, slow down, look at the budget or whatever else is going on in the chart. But because it happens to be in Capricorn and it keeps flowing, well, then you're like, oh, then keep spending. So I actually had a judgment today. I was somewhere today, no, yesterday. I was yesterday somewhere and someone said, well, it's only money. And I used to have that thought. That was me 20 years ago. And I don't think that way anymore because I've worked that aspect. So you start to see things of how you used to be and how you evolve based on lived experience. Mars in the third. So the third house, not only is it school, K through 12, neighbors, it's your mind. So you can imagine that someone that has a Mars in the third, their thoughts never stop. Those people do not stop their mind. They go and they go and they go and they go. It's like having Aries in there. It could be ADD. Usually ADD tends to be Uranus in the third, but Uranus and Mars have a very similar feature in the rapidity, in the quickness, in the impulsivity. That's why when you have Uranus square Mars, it's an impulsive. It helps with the intuition. I'm super quick intuitively. But in the earthly realm, I'm also super quick to make impulsive choices that are not good. So usually a Uranus in the third is ADD, but a Mars in the third can absolutely be ADD. And these people just can't settle the thoughts, that they're just constantly go, go, go. I don't think I have anybody with that that I can think offhand. Next, well, we did Sharon with the fourth. I have another lady. Oh no, she's got Mars in Cancer. Yours was Pisces. Let me see if I have her. No, I don't have her. Well, the person I'm thinking of is Mars conjunct Sun in Cancer in the fourth. And so the energy is towards the home. This is just one example. So Sharon's one example and this person's another. Not only is she very passive aggressive, she's very much swallows that non-confrontal nature, but her agitation or her energy or her ego, she cleans houses for a living. This woman has built an empire cleaning houses. She's an amazing businesswoman in the sense of crews and teams and people that clean. She does absolutely everything. This woman says never says the word no. She somehow she'll come over and say, oh, I have to clean your roof and I have to pressure wash your floor. Like she's the energy of Mars is in that. And because it's the fourth, one of many meanings is in the home. And so she's made her business out of channeling that Mars. From a personality perspective, she works and swallows everything. But for instance, her son went away. Her son moved away for a year. And when she shares with me how she talks to him, how she manipulates him to come back home, and now he's coming back home. So you see the Mars or the way that they act or I am come through the sign. And so now she's managed, and her son happens to be a Cancer, to get her Cancer son to come back home and live with her this year. The fifth, I mentioned before, the Mars in the fifth is a really good placement for athletes. The fifth house is entrepreneurial activities. It's athletics, it's creations. It's also sexual, sort of open sexual lovers or clandestine lovers, people that you keep on sort of the side is what I mean by open. So you can recycle lovers very quickly, especially let's say if it's in Scorpio, but Mars in the fifth, and you could be a person that produces a lot. So financially, there's a drive to create, to produce, to build your business because of the ego's driving the empire. And it's a really good placement for athletics. I have this woman, let me see if I still have her chart. A lot of people I read and then I forget to save the chart, so I lose them. No, she had like Sun, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, all in Leo in the fifth. And I was like, how are you not a professional athlete? And she's older. And she's like, I almost was. She, I think, was like a swimmer or something. So those placements are very marked in the fifth, especially like a Mars. So that would be a place that you would channel, invite them to channel their athleticism through Mars in the fifth. Mars in the sixth. So Mars in the sixth is a tricky placement because if the sixth is health, if the sixth is the home life, everyday, day-to-day routine, and you have an agitated energy in there that you want to constantly be something new, something renewal, something different, something active, it's a person that really can have lack of contentment in their work life, lack of contentment in their daily day, in their day-to-day. They constantly need a stimulant or stimulation. So that would be a perfect person who's a firefighter, an EMT, a paramedic, that their life is going to be daily, just constantly. And that's one of the professions of Aries and Mars is firefighter and paramedic. So in the sixth house of work, that's where I got that sort of connection. So that would be something that if someone comes for career counseling, you would say that would be a really good place for you to channel all of that need for daily stimulation. But those people are going to need to be stimulated daily. They're also going to be kind of like the squeaky wheel at the office. They're always going to complain. They're going to complain to the boss. They're going to complain to their supervisor. They're going to complain about this. the water's not cold, the air has to be, you know, higher. Like they're just going to be that squeaky wheel in the work, in the environment of their day to day. And the sign will determine how they do it, but that's going to be the tendency. They're also going to be very impatient at work. So this is a type of person you might want to put as a leader of teams, or runs the errands, goes and gets the Costco or whatever the things are that they have to buy for the office, because they want to be busy and in the car and going and doing things. Mars in the 7th. I have one here. So I was saying before that the 7th house, besides being the domestic partnership house, marriage, close best friends, what I see it at is the door of the zodiac. This is how how people enter into your life. Okay, so like the front door to your house. The front door to your house is Mars, then that's going to be a conflictive, argumentative type of placement. So this is the person that maybe in a marriage wants to have a very active life. They're constantly going on a trip, a plan, they're going here, they're going there, they have to constantly be moving or doing something. Because it's in Gemini, it could be that the friends and the partners are intellectually stimulating. But this is going to be a placement where you don't have approachability. And so in this particular case, she's a Libra, which is funny enough, that the house of Libra, the 7th house ruled by Libra, that should be, so to speak, more of the partnership, more of the agreeability, more of the public relations, and the hostess is actually going to be what you're going to find, even though she's a Libra, is somebody that is actually more fighting prone or aggressive prone, rather than the peacemaker or the hostess. So they could be very abrasive in their relationships. This placement also, it doesn't mean that the person, obviously everything's a mirror. This is a very strong placement for people that attract relationships that are quick. They come in, they come out. They're not longevity relationships, that's one. Another meaning of Mars in the 7th is that they can attract younger people. This is another similarity. Uranus and Mars in either the 7th or the 11th, depending on which marriage it is, can attract younger people. So if I were giving her dating advice, I may recommend to date someone younger. And Mars is in the 7th, may attract domestic violence. People that attract partners that abuse them or have some violent tendencies. Any questions so far? The 8th. Let me show you a chart with the 8th. So this person has the 8th and it's in Taurus. So it's conjunct Venus. So of course that's gonna add an added layer, but we're just looking at Mars today. The 8th house is a deep dive. So maybe the desire to go really, really deep, because the 8th house has to do with shared partnerships. They might have a business partner that's in Aries, because that's just by sign. They're going to be very much possessive, or their identity very attached to money. It's a money house, a shared resources house. They most probably will have, especially with a Mars Venus that's the partnership couple. They're probably in business with somebody of either a Venus, a Taurus, or an Aries sign. And they're going to be very much about the attachment to the money. And one of the things to learn is, I am not my money. My money is not my self-worth, because of the placement. This is also someone that their partner can run off with their money, because if Aries is impulsive and no roots and just, sort of that impulsivity, their business partner could run off with their money in an effort, let's say, that the universe is trying to teach you that you are not your money. but this is going to be a lot of emphasis because of the Taurus and the 8th house and money. Mars in the 8th is very intuitive placement in any sign, but Gemini, of course, Scorpio, Pisces, those are going to be even more intuitive. But a Mars in the 8th, intuitive by nature, 8th house of shadow and psychic and dreams and things like that is going to be a very psychic placement. Mars in the 9th. So this is what I was saying earlier about the 3rd. It's going to be, or I said Mars in the 3rd is sort of like an ADD, or Uranus in the 3rd is like an ADD. Mars in the 9th, if the 9th is supposed to be the unified consciousness, it's supposed to be the application of the wisdom, the guru, the teacher, and forget that it's in Gemini, that just adds to it. A Mars in the 9th is agitation, or unless I am the teacher, the wise one, the guru, the one on the stage, the sage on the stage, then I'm not of worth. Then of course that defeats the whole function of the 9th house. And then add to that in Gemini, where there's perhaps a lot of accumulation of knowledge to feed the ego, but it's the 9th house, where's the application piece.
Would that also be true if somebody had Aries in the 9th? Similar?
Yes, yeah. And remember that Aries starts the spiritual path, wherever it is on cusp. So if you have Aries here on the cusp of the 9th, then the first thing is the controlling of the thoughts. So what are the thoughts about spirituality? What are the thoughts about unified consciousness? What are the thoughts about being the sage on the stage that need to be addressed to propel the rest of the spiritual path? Mars in the 10th. I don't know if I have anybody with that. I love Mars in the 10th. I think Mars in the 10th is a great placement, especially if it's like in Capricorn or Gemini, or Leo. I mean, talk about being visible, right? So if the 10th is your public relations, if the 10th is your professional image. Now, the drawback to Mars in the 10th is you can get canceled real quickly because you're so impulsive with what you're saying, then you post it without thinking about it, then it's easy come, easy go with Mars. That's the thing. That's why Mars, for instance, in the 2nd, easy made, easy spent. Mars in the 7th, quick relationship, guy or girl comes in and out quickly. So that concept of easy come, easy go. But if managed correctly, or if it's in a sign that has some guidance or with an aspect that's like sextile or trine that is supported in and you have some way to control the impulsivity, Mars in the 10th is great for professional gains, for having a public image, for being very quick with your responses. Think of a comedian with a Mars in Gemini in the 10th. I mean, talk about being heckled on stage and your responses are quick. That's just a really good place for that. And logically, ego and ambition rule, are part of the domain of the 10th, right? Because it's your public image, it's your ambition. That's why Mars is exalted in Capricorn. So it's just like being a Mars in Capricorn is similar to having a Mars in the 10th. It has that similar. So if you go to that sheet from last week of the exaltations, you can turn it around. So it's like having Venus in Pisces exalted. You can have Venus in the 12th, for instance, not in Virgo, but in most signs that would be like the unity or humanity, all is one, Zen, love type of thing. So you can go to that exaltation and you can do the same thing with the planet in that house that's the ruler. That's why Mars in the 10th, I think, is one of those really great spots. Mars in the 11th. So that's my daughter. She has it in Virgo like you, Nicole. So from a perspective of the kind of man, the kind of partner that you guys like, it would be Virgonian in maybe shy or quiet or reserved or whatnot. But from the placement, we talked about the 12th, here's Mars in the 11th. So if the 11th is social groups, if the 11th is community, this would be someone who wants to be a leader. She definitely would want to stand out, be someone that has a message, that wants some social leadership. Oh, and remind me to tell you about Mars in the 8th and Aries on the cusp of the 8th. I'll tell you that. And then, like we said before, Mars in the 12th, more of that repression of those desires. If we're looking back at will and desires from the terrible twos, and of course by sign and by house. But again, the unified consciousness of the 12th, which is sort of coming full circle in humanity, fighting for humanity. Because one of the words with Mars is, this is the battleground. This is what I fight for in this house through this veil, which is the sun. So keep that sentence in mind. So let me go back to the Mars in the 8th and the cusp, which is Aries. This person happens to have the cusp in 8th and Mars in Aries. People that have, these are for Virgo ascendants. The Virgo ascendants have Aries on the cusp, and or for someone who has Mars in the 8th. Death is going to be fast, furious, quick, impulsive, done. You can be shot. You can die in a fire. Like, it's going to be very Aryan type of death. So my twin boys have this, and we've talked about this at length. So it's like, I'm like, oh, you're just going to fall off a cliff, or you're going to get just shot in the middle of a marketplace or something. So that's good. At least death is fast and furious, and you don't have to think about it. The cusp of the 8th, and we'll talk about that when we get more to Scorpio. The cusp of the 8th not only is metaphorically the Hydra that has to die in self, which is in direct contrast with your ascendant. There's always that relationship there that makes it difficult. But the cusp of the 8th, just for future thinking, is how your death is determined in terms of the quality of your death, how you cross. And then the planets in will give you some more detail. Any questions about this, about anything that we've been covering so far?
So that was kind of a big thing around the death piece.
Yeah.
They sort of just casually dropped in there, Francis. Does it have to indicate something rather violent or in nature?
No, it doesn't have to be violent.
It
doesn't have to be violent. And you
I
have
live
Chiron in there.
and I'm ready to go, and I'm just out.
That quickly. You have Chiron in Taurus in your 8th, and you've got that cusp of the 8th in Aries. So where do you have Mars? In the 12th. Oh, it's going to be super quick. You're going to, look, this is what my guides are saying. You're going to have this aha about what all this nonsense is, and you'll be like, I'm out.
Done.
Your cusp of the 8th and your 12th are going to get together, both subconscious houses. You're going to go, oh, that's what this was all about. I call it the con. I now have decided I'm in on the con of what all this is. So you're going to be in on the con, and you go, I'm done. Shoot me up,
Okay.
Scotty, shoot me up, Scotty, or whatever that was. That's what my guides are saying. Yes.
I don't think mine looks so good, Francis.
Yours doesn't look so good. You're deaf.
I don't know. I can't tell what one of
Well,
those
we've already
signs
talked that
is.
you're going to live a long time. You're going to be bitching your way to the grave, my friend. Here it is. It ruled by Gemini. That's so funny. Here it is. So here you. Your death is also going to be quick because Uranus is in there, but it's going to be ruled by Gemini. So whether it's talking or teaching or listening to a podcast, but it's going to be like, I don't know if it's intellectual is a word, because there's other words for Gemini, but Gemini is a quick thing. Think of Mercury with the winged sandals. And so you've got the quick death there with Uranus that's quick. That's great. Yeah, that's
I
where
have
I want to go. I don't want to linger.
There's a little symbol. I don't know what it is. It's in my 12th house and in my 6th, that one. What is that?
These are the nodes This is in your Cancer module in module 4 of level 1. This is the South Node, and we're going to be going now. Today we're doing Mars and Aries. Next week we'll do Venus, and we'll do this each week. But this is what we're going to find in Cancer. This is your South Node, past lives that you finish in this one. And this is the North Node, this life, where you kind of pick up your new karmic baggage in this life and you continue on with that into the future. So those signs are important, Libra and Aries, and we'll talk about that in relationship to karma and past lives and what you're leaving behind in this one. So yeah, but this is great. This is besides, and we will, when we do Scorpio and we do the cusp of the 8th, we'll talk about what has to die in terms of our psychology, right? Like that ego death that we want to learn in a lifetime that we have to let go of. That's another meaning. So remember, everything has multi-layered meanings. It's not just one. But Uranus in the 8th, there's a sexual placement there. There's a death placement there. There's an intuitive placement there. So there's a lot there, but the cusp is Gemini. And then eventually we're going to look at where you have Mercury, and then your death is related to this. So you're definitely going to be teaching or talking or at a conference or at a reunion or something in your death. So it'll be fast though.
Good.
Anything else? Okay. Then next week we will do Taurus Venus, and you'll see the Venus. We'll repeat the Venus again with Libra, but Libra has another layer. So if you're going through the lectures, you'll see that the Taurus Libra, they obviously share the Venus planet. And when we get to the Libra, we'll kind of do a repeat of Venus through the signs and the houses, but I'll give you the nuggets linked to Libra, so that you could start seeing the distinction. But anything comes up, just shoot me an email and we'll have this posted at some point later today. Jen, you have something to say? A housekeeping thing? Oh, okay. And I'll see you guys on Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Have a good week.
Francis,
Yes. You want to
stay
connect?
put for a second.
Okay, hold on. Let me just stop recording.